Welcome to everyone who's joined us this evening for this very special event. I'm Janine Birchie Johnson, and one of my roles at Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary is Alumni Director. And each year for the last 20 years or so, we have honored someone as the Ministry and Service Recognition recipient for the year. And we are so glad to have two people that we're recognizing tonight. And they were selected in the spring, and then over the summer, the information about them was collected and written into a story. And we set this date for a night to recognize them. I was just realizing that yesterday was a year since we did last year's recognition. So we hit about the same time this year as well. So our award honors alumni who've made outstanding contributions in congregational ministry, teaching, mission, or peace work, spiritual direction, or other ministries. And so we will be starting here in just a minute. I want to ask each of you to please mute yourself if you haven't already done that, and to stay muted until we move into our breakout rooms, unless you are one of the people that are speaking. I ask that you join me in an opening prayer. Empowering God, with your people throughout the ages, you have called leaders for the church and empowered them with your Holy Spirit. As we gather here to celebrate the leadership of Michele Hershberger and Jack Suderman, we acknowledge your presence with them and with us. Thank you for the many gifts you have bestowed on them to be shared with your church and the world. Thank you for filling them with wisdom, patience, and hope for their callings. Bless this time of celebration and continue to call each of us to serve you and your people. Amen. I now will turn it over to AMBS President David Buschert, who will recognize our award recipients.
Thank you, Janine. Well, I want to welcome all of you who have joined us today to honor two of our alumni who have made outstanding contributions through their ministry and service. And if you haven't already read the story about them, the full story about them, I encourage you to do that to get a fuller picture of their lives. I am delighted to present the 2025 AMBS Alumni Ministry and Service Recognition to Michele Hershberger. Can you see this? Let's get it in focus at least. Is it focused?
I think it's not focused because you've blurred your background, and so you'll have to put it right next to you, right next to your face. And now you're muted.
Sorry. Let's not blur the background. Now, can you see now? There we are. There's Michelle's certificate. We'll be sending it to you, suitable for framing. And for Robert Jack Suderman, I'll be celebrating you both this evening. I'll read a short summary of each of these people's contribution, and then each of them will share for a few minutes after I share between each one. Michele Hershberger came to AMBS after serving as a pastor in Oregon with her husband, Dell. The whole family moved to Elkhart and lived on campus at AMBS. While a student, Michele started a mentoring program at the local elementary school, recruiting fellow students and employees to serve as mentors to some of the children at the school. She was also one of the stars of a seminary production of the musical Smoke on the Mountain, entertaining everyone with her dramatic signing, not singing, of There Is a Fountain Filled with Blood and other gospel favorites. Michele received the Master of Arts Theological Studies degree in 2000 with a concentration in biblical studies. And that year, she began working at Hesston College as a professor of Bible and ministry. And she just finished her 25th year in that role. And a large birthday happened yesterday for Michele. So along with Marion Bontrager in the past and now Nick Ladd, she has taught the introductory Bible courses to hundreds of students. As part of that course, Michele asked each student to memorize salvation history, the Heilsgeschichte, and recite the outline of the biblical story. This learning experience has been noted by many as a very significant part of their faith development. And at least one of my sons is a recipient of that gift of your teaching, Michele. For the last 2 academic years, Michele has also served as one of the campus pastors at Hesston College, taking on primary leadership for planning formation, what used to be called chapel, and leading the ministry inquiry program. Michele is also known as a popular conference and convention speaker and workshop leader. Since her time as a student at AMBS, Michele has authored or co-authored 8 books. Her books, God's Story, Our Story, exploring... Oops, I'm missing something here. Oh, here we are. Yep. Sorry. Her book, God's Story, Our Story, exploring Christian faith and life, and Finding Ourselves in God's Story, exploring Christian faith and life, and having served as the official catechism for the Mennonite Church USA and Mennonite Church Canada. She is also author of What Gives, Using God's Money, a Christian view of hospitality, Money Talk, Living Generously, and Why Did Jesus Die and What Difference Does It Make? And she is the co-author of Now It Springs Up, and The Bible is Story, an Introduction to Biblical Literature. This last weekend, as I said, Michele celebrated her birthday. So congratulations, Michele, on being named one of this year's AMBS Alumni Ministry and Service Recognition recipients. We invite you to share a few thoughts with us now.
Thank you. Thank you, David. And I would like to thank it means so much to me, to my friends and family, to see your faces and for you being here. Thank you. Thank you to the AMBS community and Janine and everyone for this recognition. Most of all, I want to thank my family, my husband, Tara, Aaron, and JD and Jay, my family who has made many sacrifices so that I could even go to seminary and pursue a career in ministry. Your support for me has meant the world, my dear family, and I love you. So I just want to tell 3 short stories that kind of express how AMBS has shaped me and my gratitude for that shaping. The first story. I have a lot of gratitude to AMBS for affirming my call to the ministry. Now, that might seem very simple, but my call was a bit in doubt when I first walked into the doors of AMBS. To back the story up a little bit, Dell and I became pastors in a Mennonite church in Western Oregon before we went to seminary. And I know this is not the way to do it. This is a backwards way of doing it. I would do it again in a heartbeat. I think this is how it was meant to be. God works in mysterious ways. I was called to be the youth pastor, and I loved it. And there'll always be a part of me that is just pure youth pastor until the day I die. It was beautiful. I love that church. There was a barrier to my ministry there in that some in this dear congregation did not want me to be licensed or ordained or actually even preach because I am female. And we worked through that. We processed that puppy to death, actually. And we took a vote, and I lost that vote. And I had to resign. And that was a really tough time. I was devastated. But 3 places helped me heal and were God's places of healing for me. The first is Western Mennonite School, who hired me as the Bible teacher during this time. And they gave me a lot of care, and they reignited my love for teaching. And it was there that Dell and I really decided that we needed to go to seminary. The second organization was the Giving Project, where I was the project associate working with Mark Vincent, a Mennonite organization meant to teach on generosity and stewardship. So with Mark, I traveled all over Canada and the United States teaching and preaching on generosity and stewardship, and I loved it. And Mark actually took a pretty big risk with me. I'm a nobody, and he took this chance on me, and I loved it. Wrote my first book there, A Christian View of Hospitality. And this all launched me into coming to AMBS. And there, this beloved community enveloped me, wiped my tears, heard my story, and said, yeah, Michele, you are called. Because even after all, I was in doubt a bit. I was unsure. Your gifts of encouragement mean the world to me. Story number 2. When Dell and I came to seminary, we were a young family, 3 small children, the youngest being preschool age. And he loved the AMBS daycare, by the way, including this brand new little computer game. JD, you remember this? The Oregon Trail. So he was very good at this. And the 2 older ones went to Hawthorne Elementary, a local public school. And everything was good until it wasn't. Our oldest was beaten up at school at Hawthorne twice. And this brought up a lot of questions. Do we pull our kids out of public school and put them into private school? Because we could have found the money somewhere. But yet that didn't quite feel right, because we knew that public schools needed our support. We didn't just want to run away from the problem, but we wanted to protect our children. All sorts of questions. The larger issue for me was that I now had an enemy. I'd never really had one before. There were whole groups of people that the U.S. tried to get me to hate, of course, but I'd also grown up my whole life being taught to love my enemy. And I thought that was a relatively easy thing to do because my enemies were all overseas, but now I had a real one, a little girl who beat up my daughter. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Or when I did sleep, I would wake up in the middle of the night, the sheets wrapped around me. I'm drenched in sweat because I'm fighting this little girl who beat up my daughter. I was a mess. And the AMBS community and my beloved Belmont Mennonite Church came to the rescue. You all set me down, looked me in the eye and said, Michele, you're going to have to meet with this little girl and get to know her and get to love her. And I said, oh no, that's a grand idea and you can do that, but I'm fine, thank you very much. It's enough for me just not to press charges. And you persisted. And you said no to me. And you said, you know what, Michele? You need to forgive this girl for your own sake, for your own benefit. You're never going to get rid of this terrible burden of hatred and bitterness until you do. And of course, you were right. And so I did. I met with this little girl at Hawthorne Elementary, and we also had permission to go across the street to the Dairy Queen. And at first, I thought God would honor me by making all of this very easy, and it absolutely wasn't. She was snotty and a mess, and I thought, what am I doing here? And then it snuck up on me. I did learn to love her. I learned her story. She had been abandoned, neglected. She had been tortured. And that doesn't excuse what she did to my daughter. That explains it. And the words of my professor, Perry Yoder, came back to me as he taught us about shalom justice. The justice of the Bible, the justice that's all over the Bible, is shalom justice. where we give people what they need instead of the punishment they deserve. And so we helped this little girl get out of an abusive home and into the care. I mean, she probably deserved to be expelled from school, but what she needed were caring adults. We helped her find them. And as David said, we worked with Big Brothers Big Sisters. You probably know this organization. And we ran into a bit of a snafu because her mother would not allow a home visit, maybe for obvious reasons. So we did a workaround and we met at the school. And to my knowledge and understanding, this was the very first time Big Brothers and Big Sisters ever allowed this. This little girl and I were the first bigs at school, which is something that happens now all over the United States. That's a little side benefit. She found love, and I also found healing from a hatred that was eating me up inside. And my third story. I love to preach. When I was about 5, I would line my little dollies up against the wall and I would let them have it. They're a great audience because they can't move. And, you know, my grandpa Schrock, he was a pastor. My dad said, "Oh, Michele, it's too bad you were not born a boy, for you were surely born a pastor, a preacher." And my father is very, very supportive of me, always has been, of my ministry. But these were the times that we lived in. Women just weren't preachers. And I mean, I was part of a congregation where a woman couldn't even teach an adult class that had males in it or receive the offering. This is just who we were. And yet, like Jeremiah, I had a fire in my bones. I could not be silent. Again, I was a bit of a mess. To the rescue comes June Alleman Yoder, my preaching professor at AMBS. I told her my story, and she helped me. And she would not let me off the hook when I would try to do the, "Oh, well, I'm a female, I'm a woman." She said, "No, don't even go there." She taught me how to preach. She said she taught me how I should never try to imitate anybody else because that's fake and phony. I need to find who I am. And you do that through prayer, and you do that through meditation, and you do it by accepting God's love for who you are, finding your identity in God's love. And I did. June helped me find my voice. And I truly believe that finding my voice was kind of like finding my soul. It didn't hurt that she also taught me Lowry's Loop, which is a fantastic way to preach, and I have used it numerous times. But I will always again be grateful to the AMBS community for helping me find my voice and find my way in what seemed to be a brand new journey for women. So there you have it. I thank you, AMBS community, for affirming my call, for challenging me to love my enemies and not letting me off the hook, and for teaching me how to preach. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Michele, for those 3 very powerful stories. And it's just amazing to be a part of the legacy of AMBS today that launched you in that way. But then you took what you gained at AMBS and you and God and the support of your family went on to do amazing things and had an amazing ministry, touching so many, forming so many lives of so many young people through your ministry. So thank you. Well, Robert J. Suderman, who often goes by Jack, came to AMBS with his wife, Irene, in 1973, after teaching at Westgate Mennonite Collegiate in Winnipeg. At AMBS, they were influenced by fellow students from around the world and developed many close relationships through their K group. Jack received his Master of Religious Education degree in 1975. Following graduation, Jack served as principal at Rosthern Junior College in Saskatchewan before the Sudermans moved to Costa Rica to study Spanish in preparation for work in Cochabamba, Bolivia, where Suderman was a professor at Seminario Teología Bautista, Baptist Theological Seminary. After that, Jack supported leadership and pastoral training for the Colombian Mennonite Church and led leadership training in Cuba. In 1994, he earned a Doctor of Theology from the Pontificia Universidad Javeriana in Bogota, Colombia. After that, Jack held various positions in Mennonite Church Canada, including Executive Secretary of the Council of Christian Education, Executive Secretary of the Mission Commission, and lastly, General Secretary of Mennonite Church Canada. When beginning that final role, he took on the ambitious task of visiting every congregation in Mennonite Church Canada. At the same time, he served Mennonite World Conference as secretary and then chair of the Peace Commission. Jack is the author of Calloused Hands, Courageous Souls, Holistic Spirituality of Development and Mission, God's People Now, face-to-face with Mennonite Church Canada, following his visits to every congregation in Canada. It's actually a summary of the 300 hours he spent visiting every Mennonite church in Canada. Also, Jack authored The Baby and the Bathwater, Aspiration and Reality in the Life of the Church. Jack had a series of substantial essays in his work over the years in missional ecclesiology. These essays were collected into a book by his son Andrew, and the book is titled Reimagining the Church, Implications of Being a People in the World. I might add it's a required text we use in our leadership theory class in the Doctor of Ministry program. Now retired, Jack also serves as a professional mentor for one of our students in AMBS's Doctor of Ministry and Leadership program. Congratulations, Jack, on being named one of this year's AMBS Alumni Ministry and Service Recognition recipients. And I'll turn the time over to you now.
Thank you, Dave. I too want to express my appreciation for AMBS for this recognition, to you, David, and to Janine, and to the other people involved. And there's some people on the screen here that were, I understand, even behind the scenes promoters of this process. Thank you. And especially also my wife, Irene, who is sitting right here beside me, for 60 years of accompaniment and partnership, and a critical and important and integral partner of everything that I've done ever. And also to our family, I noticed that you asked before whether they would be on screen. It looks like they all are. So my thank you also to your support for persistently being present, encouraging and egging me on well beyond my own comfort zone. I love you all and appreciate that very much, even though I sometimes resist some of your ideas. It's about 57 years ago that I first had an awakening that God was apparently wanting to use the church as a formidable tool for the reconciliation of all of creation. As still happens today, that awakening was not sudden. It was like the arrival of a dawn, at first sound asleep and then unaware, but then drowsy, and then slowly more alert to this realization of the dream of God. And as I reflect on my ministry with and for and in the church, there are at least another 1,000 or 10,000 or so thank yous that need to be expressed to friends and colleagues and companions on the road. And our son Brian, who is also on the screen somewhere, in one of his songs says that it's good to have companions on the way. and it's good to be a companion on the way. And how true that is. I am deeply grateful for all those very many people around the globe who have been companions on the way. And some of you are here on the screen with me from Colombia and other places as well. And of course, I'm grateful to God for having a dream of restoring and reconciling creation through communities of faithfulness. That's not just an everyday dream. That's a big thing. And that dream centered in Jesus of Nazareth has provided the framework that I've needed to know what to do with my life. It's an all-encompassing vision and dream for the world as it was meant to be. And that's been enough to inspire me to try to be a cog in that wheel somehow. I can't point to a day or to an exact time when I realized that I had been caught in the web of this dream. But I can point to the years in which this dawn began to appear. It was somewhere between 1968 and 1973. In those years, I was exposed for the first time to a group of colleagues, fellow teachers at Westgate Mennonite Collegiate in Winnipeg, where I found myself surrounded by theologically and biblically formally trained, articulate, very passionate, and dedicated folks whose days and conversations from morning till night were filled with their attempt to be faithful to what they had learned in the classrooms and the books and the studies that they had had. And there was no lack of agenda. Here they were determined to apply their learnings into how do we deal with misbehaving students in an Anabaptist way. How do we discipline? How does discipline work if Jesus is Lord? How do we develop grading and marking systems that reflect God's intention for the formation of a people in a reconciling way? How does physical education and physics and chemistry classes fit into this larger vision of God for the world and for the church? How do our schedules and our timetables and choir tours contribute to our desire to form a people of God? It was nonstop for 5 years with these folks from morning till night. Every question that you can imagine that happens in a high school was put through the screen of these kinds of questions. And slowly during those years, it dawned on me that I too needed formal help in grappling with such life-related questions. I realized that I was stimulated by this conversation, but I was severely handicapped because I did not have the tools that they did. And so my colleagues there encouraged me to go to AMBS to address this felt need. And so we decided to do so. And there were only 2 short years at AMBS. You know, when we think of it, it's only 2 short years. And I say short years because our years there were only 9 months long. Because in summertime, we needed to go back to Winnipeg to earn money for the next semester. But the impact of those 2 9-month years have reverberated in our lives of ministry ever since. So how did AMBS orchestrate this impact? I don't know exactly. I won't go into detail. Michele already has done a fabulous job of isolating some of those points. But in general, the impact was a combination of what happened inside the classroom, inside the library, inside the chapel, service assignments, and in the community itself. And I'm pleased to see a number of our colleagues from AMBS in those years on the screen here today. You will remember some of this. Given that a high percentage of the students and their families were all living on campus in those days, it was baptism by immersion. It is difficult to explain, and I think impossible to replicate today what we experienced then. And when I think of this, it makes me realize how old I am, and it even makes me realize even more how old I sound. Because in those days, we did not have email or messenger. We actually talked to each other. We did not have Netflix or Sportsnet. We played soccer and ping pong, and we organized community events and entertainment. We did not have Zoom or AI. We sat together with each other, and if somebody had missed a class, we would update them on what they had missed. And we read books, and we did homework and research projects together till late at night. I recognize how old-fashioned this sounds, but I'm trying to answer the question, what did AMBS actually do in its formation process to help us? And these are things that AMBS did for us. David has already mentioned the K groups. K is short for koinonia. This was a genius idea that they had at the time, that the entire community, including professors, staff, and students, and families, spouses, would be included in K groups. And we would meet every week. And by obligation, faculty members needed to be in a group. And this in itself was a profound gesture of servanthood leadership, because often I thought of this, just imagine faculty and staff who year after year after year after year immerse themselves in the personal lives of the parade of students that passed through and before them. It was a tremendous commitment on their part. I didn't realize it at the time. I realized it more after we left. The presence of international students in the classroom and the K groups was invigorating. And I could go on, but I won't. Needless to say, I am grateful we are grateful to AMBS and for what we experienced there. And so now AMBS has seen fit to recognize me in this special way. And while I am grateful for this, in doing so, AMBS is actually celebrating its own contribution to ministry and leadership in the world. And I hope someday we can reverse or invert this process where actually the alumni will somehow give AMBS an award for the contribution that they have provided and given and continue to do so for the world. And so if I deserve this recognition, then so do hundreds and thousands of others who have passed through those halls and who have tried to implement some of the learnings of their ministry. And I see some of you on the screen right now. Thank you for being companions on the road. And that leads me to a second question, perhaps best expressed in a line of a popular gospel song, Lord, help me, Jesus. The line goes something like this. I won't try to sing it, but this is kind of the line that reverberates in my head. It goes like this. Why me, Lord? What have I ever done to deserve even one of the pleasures I've known? Sorry, that's a Chris Christopherson version, so you may know it some other way. But it's a good question. What have I ever done to deserve the pleasures or even to deserve this kind of recognition? And that's a question I continue to grapple with, even as I'm grateful to be recognized in this way. And perhaps the only way of answering the question is to realize that maybe I'm right in the midst of another awakening, another dawn. And this time, what is slowly dawning on me, and it's not easy, but it's dawning on me that people maybe actually have been observing our trajectory of ministry through the years. And maybe in some ways, people have been impacted in some way. Maybe some people have been blessed in some way. Maybe others are saying that their lives are different because of mine. And if any of this is true, I can only thank God's Spirit for taking our gifts and allowing them to help others. I don't think I'm quite awake to this possibility yet, but if that is the answer or part of it, then I'm grateful to God for using me and for using us as a family to move the dream forward just a little bit. Thank you to all of you for being here. We are grateful for each one.